Signal Man sneaking through the inside of King for a day. Here's Signal Man and Puskapart fade to the wire together. Signal Man inside, got it!
VEKOMA takes command. It's VEKOMA by 2. VEKOMA is a colt with serious promise.
Coming toward the 8th pole, VEKOMA has the lead out to 2 lengths now. Some Like It Hot Brown changes lanes to the outside 2nd. Signalman is in 3rd. VEKOMA, the leader, past the 16th pole. He has the advantage out to 5 lengths.
Cortland Simmons with you here at the CS Racing Report Super Saturday Road to the Roses recap. 3 major races, the final preps for the Run for the Roses at Churchill Downs in historic Louisville, Kentucky. And of course we had the Bluegrass Stakes, the Wood Memorial, and the Santa Anita Derby. Let's quickly start off with the recap of the Bluegrass Stakes. 9 furlongs, $1 million on the line for these 3-year-olds in Lexington, Kentucky. A full field of 14, a lot of interesting horses in here, including VEKOMA, who had come off a nice 3rd place effort in the Fountain of Youth. Signal Man, a horse that had run poorly in that Fountain of Youth, but had had success at Keeneland, running 2nd to 70-1 Knicks Go in the Breeders' Futurity. He'd also run 2nd at Churchill down the street, home of the Kentucky Derby, in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, finishing 3rd behind Game Winner and Knicks Go. And then, of course, he didn't run so well down at Gulfstream Park. He was coming in for Ken McPeek to try to redeem himself. He had a couple horses out of the Tampa Bay Derby, actually 3 horses. Win, who had a wide trip after a stunning win in the Pasco Stakes that really kind of gave him semi-favoritism at Tampa. Ran a very, very good 3rd after being carried wide in that race. And Sir Winston was a fast closing 5th in that race. Didn't get any points. He was looking to make his last ditch attempt to get into the Kentucky Derby, along with Admire from Dale Romans, who was 7th in that same Tampa Bay Derby, which I have, of course, alluded to as being a strong prep. And certainly this was another opportunity for horses coming out of that race to prove themselves, as well as VEKOMA out of the Fountain of Youth. In the end, VEKOMA was able to win this race by 3.5 lengths, with Win just getting up on the last jump to edge Signal Man out for the place spot. Signal Man was 3rd. Some Like It Hot Brown, the Jeff Ruby Stakes winner, making the switch for Michael Maker from the synthetic to the dirt after having success on the turf, ran a very credible 4th. Chess Chief was 5th. So Alive for Todd Pletcher, who was a distant 3rd in the Sam F. Davis, which is the major prep for the Tampa Bay Derby, finished 6th. Sir Winston was a disappointing 7th. He was a horse that I had picked in a number of the superfectas that I had put forth in the preview podcast. Admired finished 8th. Moonster, who was 3rd in the Jeff Ruby, that was thought to have had some promise, finished 9th. Lucky Lee 10th. Market King for D. Wayne Lucas, 3rd in the 2nd division of that Rebel, a distant 3rd behind Omaha Beach and Game Winner, finished 11th. Aquadini, a horse that a couple people, handicappers, were talking about, a son of Bernardini that had promise, was 12th. Coming out of the 14 hole, he was kind of compromised. Dreammaker, once again, a couple of handicappers thought the disaster after the rousing win at the fairgrounds that gave him favoritism at the Tampa Bay Derby. People thought he was going to rebound in this race. He finished 13th for trainer Mark Cassidy, and Parsimony for Doug O'Neill picked up the rear in 14th. And let's quickly look at the disappointments. Dreammaker had problems in the Hopeful Stakes, had issues in the Breeders' Futurity, as I've touched on in previous podcasts, was brilliant in a allowance race at the fairgrounds, looking like he had returned to form, didn't pick up a foot or a horseshoe in the Tampa Bay Derby, and once again basically put a stench out on the Lexington Oval that basically eliminated him from all consideration of the Derby. A terrible performance from him. Some Like It Hot Brown in finishing 4th. He and VEKOMA got into a nice little tussle on the front end in fractions of 23.26 on the front end, 47.03 for the half, 111.55. Things start slowing down at the 3/4, but this is when VEKOMA made the same kind of move that Some Like It Hot Brown did against his opposition in the Jeff Ruby. Took the lead on the turn. As we all know, he's got that paddling issue. It's not a really pleasant sight to see. Looks like a horse running with a broken leg, to be quite honest with you, but he was able to straighten out, level off, and win by 3.5. Signal Man, and in looking at the description of VEKOMA before we get into Signal Man, VEKOMA tracked, basically, battled for the lead, took the lead on the turn, as I said, drifted a little bit in that stretch as we once again touch on the paddling issue of that leg going out. Then he drew clear. He got first run on Signal Man and quite a few of the other horses, but that, just like with Good Magic's tactical strategy in the 2018 Bluegrass, that is what serves you very well, particularly with the short stretch at Keeneland. Although you can make the argument for closers, it does force horses to maybe have to inject a little bit of speed, and that can be beneficial if they have the stamina to sustain on the longer, with longer or more real estate at Churchill Downs. Some horses are just not going to change their style, and they're just going to have to make do with that sort of shortened stretch at Keeneland. But nevertheless, VEKOMA's tactics were very useful in this particular spot. Signal Man saved ground. He got out well, stalked the pace, was pretty much in that first flight. The first 5 horses went from 5th to 3rd, made a nice move on the turn, but then when the real running began, he lost a little bit of ground, and whether that was because he went wide or because he was getting a little bit tired, he then switched off into the inside lane. He kind of hung a little bit, and then he was nipped for the place spot by Win. He's a horse that again, he improved, which was important compared to what happened in the Fountain of Youth, which was very little. It was a very nice improvement, but is it enough for him to step one more rung up the ladder when they go down the street in Louisville for the Kentucky Derby? Is he going to be able to use those same tactics relative to the 1.25 miles and be able to finish the way that he did in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and actually in the Breeders' Futurity at the same Keeneland venue that the Bluegrass has held? Again, we'll take a look more at the ramifications of his performance. Win really was arguably the best horse in the race. He and VEKOMA were the 2 best horses because Win in the description of him and just being able to nip Signal Man for the place spot, he was 11th early. Got off to a little bit slower start, but maybe that's his adopted second style of running. He's got an added style of running versus the sort of pace pressing tactics that he showed, or the speed in the Pasco. Maybe this horse is smarter than we give him credit for, that he knows that these races are longer. Let the other horses burn their brakes and burn their horseshoes to a crisp, and I'll just make my run. So the versatility is there, even if you want to make a case that he didn't get off to the start that they would have ideally liked. But he settled in, saved ground, split horses on the back stretch, got completely stopped on the turn, which, as Jerry Bailey made a great assessment, or accurately assessed, that is the worst place when you're trying to make that final run to be stopped. And he really did have to be, he had to be taken up very hard, 3 furlongs out, still swung out 5 wide, made a very strong rally, picked up horses very nicely, albeit they were getting tired, but that's part and parcel of the package of making a successful late bid. And he did that, came flying down the lane, got up just at the finish to get the place spot. Very important for a couple reasons. Number one, the finish strongly. Number two, to get those 40 points to go along with the points that he got, the 10 points that he got at Tampa for finishing 3rd there. So he gets into the Kentucky Derby, and actually deservedly so. Very nice run from him. As I said before, Signal Man, again, I'm just wondering, and I think a lot of people are, is he going to be able to turn those cylinders over where horses are running like they're floating, their feet are just flying off the ground? Like Pegasus with wings sprouting from each side. So is he the kind of horse that will have, he's going to have to show a little more speed. The argument I'm going to try to make and pose to Kenny McPeek and for anyone that's taking a hard look at this horse, son of General Quarters, is that maybe he needs to take back a little bit and sort of draw back from the pace. It may end up circumstantially in the Derby if he gets enough points to win. He had 10 points as a 2-year-old, and that's another debate. I don't think 2-year-old races should really yield Derby points. He gets 20 points here, so he probably is going to be able to be on the bubble that's going to just get him over the the finish line to make it to the Derby. But again, I think that he probably is going to be best served to sit back. And I think, as I said before, circumstantially in the Derby, there's going to be a lot of stalk and pouncers and some speed in there, and that may shuffle him back also based on post position, but he's going to try to be forwardly placed. So even if he gets shuffled back a little bit, as long as he's not 17 wide out in the grandstand having mint juleps with the fans out there at the Derby, he's got a chance to work out a trip. And again, as Bob Baffert always said, you get these dead horses. So again, some like it, that's the key on Signal Man. Moving on to Some Like It Hot Brown, I thought he ran very well. He got a little tired in the lane, like VEKOMA. He drifted, he led, he got overtaken, got outrun. He was a game effort. I think he's still a very, very nice horse. People think that he's a better horse on turf, where he started out before going to synthetic and eventually being placed here on the main track. But he's a very handy horse. He's good on all surfaces. So I think for Mike Maker, it's not a question of either or. He's got a lot of different spots that he can run in based on how he's doing physically. And though he probably won't make it to the Kentucky Derby, he did get 20 points for the Jeff Ruby. He gets 10 points here, so he is kind of on the bubble, and he is a front runner, and you never know on the front end. Maybe some of these other horses just don't want, to pick it up at, to go the 10 furlongs, and maybe he is a horse that will improve. He looks like he's a little on the slow side. That was my one concern based on the slow time in the Jeff Ruby, but again, turf races or synthetic races have a tendency to yield a little bit slightly slower clocking, so he did well on this surface. Is this the kind of race that sets him up to possibly be in the Kentucky Derby and, be one of those front runners that might surprise you? Most people are going to say that that Mike Maker probably will pass on the Derby. He could be a Preakness horse, and we all know he could be one of the favorites for the Crown Royal American Turf on the lawn at Churchill on the Derby undercard. But a very nice run from him. The others, really not much to say. Market King, I think a lot of people thought he was outclassed, but he might have a small chance to impact this race, even though he was a distant third in the Rebel, to show that maybe even a horse finishing that far back could be legitimate in the Bluegrass. That didn't happen. And then Dreammaker disappointed once again. I was really surprised. A couple of handicappers really looked hard at him. I'm very pleased that I nailed the VEKOMA as the number 2. If you looked at my trifectas, I had win as a win bet in one of the superfectas, and I had VEKOMA as my final pick. I'm not bragging or tooting my horn. Maybe there's a little bit of a noise back there, but very happy that this horse came through. And the final assessment on him would be, can he go 1.25 miles? A lot of people doubted that he can go 1.1 miles, and they're going to still be skeptics that say, well, he did good here, but he drifted a little bit, and he's not a candidate to go 1.25 miles, but he's a technical horse. He has speed, and if you want to believe that the progression from having a layoff after winning the Nashua, he didn't run in the Remsen or any of the other graded races, that gap between that race and his first start at the Fountain of Youth, where he ran well, ran a little better here, then the natural progression would be, even with the added distance, he should improve. He's a son of Candy Ride, just like Game Winner, that he should improve and run better in the Derby. Now, where that's going to put him with all those other horses stacked in the field of 20 is obviously one of those mysteries that's going to be solved once they break out of the gate, if all goes well for VEKOMA. But he's a horse that has the right kind of tactics to be very legitimate, to have an opportunity to contend in the Derby. Again, I believe that that maybe 1.25 miles might not be his best trip, but that's a question mark on all these horses, and he certainly has dismissed to some degree the naysayers that didn't think he can get this trip. I picked him to win right here. Kentucky Derby, we'll see where he fits in with all the other horses once we get past the Arkansas Derby, and in reevaluating the preps that were also held on this Super Saturday, the Wood Memorial and the Santa Anita Derby. But once again, VEKOMA for trainer George Weaver, a disciple of both Wayne Lucas and Todd Pletcher, gets to the Kentucky Derby with VEKOMA, who wins the Bluegrass Stakes by 3.5 lengths over the win for Michael Trombetta and Signal Man for Kenny McPeek. VEKOMA, the winner of the 2019 Bluegrass Stakes.
We're going to find out if he can go the distance. He's got great tactical speed. Put him in a good spot for him in the first turn and just ride him natural.
Coming toward the 8th pole, VEKOMA has the lead out to 2 lengths now. Some Like It Hot Brown changes lanes to the outside second. Signalman is in third. Chess Chief is fourth. Win is fifth.
Have we seen the best of VEKOMA yet? He's so talented. He's done things in the morning for me that I really haven't had a colt like this the whole time I've trained.
VEKOMA, the leader, past the 16th pole. He has the advantage out to 5 lengths. Back to Some Like It Hot Brown Signalman, then win. It is VEKOMA for Javier Castellano and trainer George Weaver. Official winner of Keeneland's featured 10th race, the $1 million Toyota Bluegrass. 2, VEKOMA, owned by Gatz's Stable LLC of Michael Gatz's, owned also by R.A. Hill Stable of Raymond Hill III. Trained by George Weaver. 4 wins today for Javier Castellano. VEKOMA, 3-year-old son of Candy Ride out of Mona de Mama by Spikestown, bred in Kentucky by Alpha Delta Stables LLC. This Keeneland September sales graduate covers the 9 furlongs over the fast main track in 1 minute 50.93 seconds. VEKOMA, the leader past the 16th pole. It is VEKOMA for Javier Castellano and trainer George Weaver.